Hey guys, long time no see. I've been pretty busy lately, so sorry for the radio silence. It's tough traveling all over, trying to find weird things to write about, but I suppose it's not really something I can complain about either. I get to see a lot of the world, or at least the United States, and it's always nice to get to have a look at other places and new things. I was in California a couple of days ago, spending some time on the West Coast as I investigate a haunted stretch of boardwalk. I know that sounds pretty dull, but it actually wasn't too bad. Apparently a lot of murders had occurred on that piece of boardwalk, and the city council was looking for some kind of proof that the place was haunted so they could mark it as a tourist trap. I was more than happy to help them with that, but what I found was less supernatural and more of the earth. A bunch of homeless guys had made a camp down there, somehow hooking up their tents under the rafters so they were a little harder to see, and they hadn't really been too keen on me poking around down there. I managed to get out, but it was a near thing. The police had been called, the homeless guys had been rousted, and they'd found some things under there that led me to believe the homeless guys were a little less friendlier than even I had thought. I can't say much, since it's an ongoing investigation, but the cops said anytime you find that many wallets and ID cards in one place, it's probably not because they're taking tolls. I was walking out of the police station, ready to go back to my hotel and sleep for a couple of hours, when my phone rang with the last person I'd expected to hear from. I had actually just been getting ready to try and draft something for my editor, the guy who's always looking for his next story, but he told me it would have to wait because he had found something even better. I need you to head to Alabama. They've got something at a house near Jackson that's supposed to be a must-see. Let me guess. It's a pig with Jesus' face, maybe a rooster that can speak in tongues. I will admit I was a little salty about the mirror he had sent me to investigate a few months ago. I'm all for a good spooky story, but that had been a total waste of time. The mirror had not only not had a demon in it, but it hadn't even been that impressive. It was pretty clear that it was, just a LED TV hooked up to a mirror frame, and was scaring the Jesus out of people who didn't know any better. But my editor still wanted a full rundown on it, and I like making my rent too much to tell him no. It had definitely been one of those tourist traps that's better to give a miss to, and I'd been salty about being put on a wild goose chase ever since. Even better, he said, it's supposed to be a fiddle owned by the devil himself. I stood there for a minute or two, just really trying to process what he was telling me, and when I came up with nothing, I finally just had to laugh and get it out of my system. Seth, I don't know what music you've been listening to, but everybody knows that the devil went to Georgia, not Alabama. And that's good. I'm surprised you're not doing a little stand-up while you're out there on the road. Anyway, I'll double your rate if you can be there by tomorrow and take a look before the end of the week. I've already got you a plane ticket and everything. As much as I hated it, money talks and bullshit walks. I was on the next flight to Jackson, Alabama, though I was sour to find out that the jerk hadn't even sprung for first class. I had to ride in coach next to a fussy baby, and his mother was even more fussy. Probably didn't help matters much that the in-flight movie was Snakes on a Plane. Not something anybody really wants to be reminded of while you're 3,000 feet up. We landed in about 3 hours, thankfully without seeing even a single snake, and I went to check in at the Jackson Motor Lodge so that I could get this miserable assignment out of the way. Then I could get back to the real news, like two-headed calves and ghosts who lived in libraries or casinos or somewhere with a buffet. The lady at the Motor Lodge was pretty knowledgeable about local tourist traps, and when I mentioned this one, I saw her ears perk up. The devil fiddle? Oh yeah, I know where it's at. Ernest Slocum has it at his house. He's charging $25 a head to see it. It must be something, 'cause he's making pretty good money at it." You've got to be kidding me. You mean people are paying to see that kind of thing? The woman got a sour look on her face. To see a fiddle? No. To look at a fiddle played by the devil himself? They certainly are. You can believe it or not, but I saw that fiddle, and I believe that the devil played it. It's got an aura about it, and a lot of people have seen it. It has been said that they've had bad dreams because of it. Go up there and have a look for yourself before you scoff. You might change your mind. I thanked her and took my rental car back into the hollers of northern Alabama so that I could take a look at this so-called devil fiddle. If you've never tried to get a rental car into the hoots and hollers of northern Alabama, then let me just tell you, it's not a lot of fun. I nearly got stuck twice, and the second time I really didn't think I was going to get out. If it hadn't been for a couple of guys with a chain fall, I'd probably still be stuck there. They pulled my poor little Corolla out and told me I might want to think about something with four-wheel drive the next time I decided to come up here. I thanked them and set out again in search of this fiddle and its less than amiable owner. I had talked to a couple of people on the way up here, and most of them agreed that the only thing stranger than the fiddle was Ernest Slocum himself. They said that the Slocums had been musicians for as long as anyone could remember. The whole family was into bluegrass music, and almost all of them had been fiddlers. Ernest was the first one in about 5 generations with absolutely no talent for it. So instead of playing the fiddle, he showed it off. He started telling people that it was the secret to his family's success. He said the fiddle that he had was from the devil, and it was why his family was so renowned for their music talent. They'd had it since about the 1800s, and his great-great-great-great-grandfather had apparently sold his soul for it and the talent. Other than that, they said he was a sour old man who was making money hand over fist, with the help of his cursed fiddle, of course, and all of them agreed that they had not only seen it, but that it was something to see. I pulled up outside his little shack at about 4:30 in the afternoon, and shack might have been too kind a term. I had seen a lot of strange dwellings in my time. The tent made out of ghost grass certainly comes to mind, but this place was like a broom closet with a roof. It looked like Ernest would be lucky to get a pot-bellied stove and a camp cot in there, and I imagined he could probably wake up in the morning and touch all 4 walls. The subject was sitting on the porch when I came up, picking his teeth and watching me make my way up his pitted driveway. He smiled, clearly hogging all of 5 teeth to himself, and got straight to business. "You 'ere what to see the fiddle, ain't you?" Took me a moment to decipher what he had said, and as it all came home, I found myself nodding. Yes, sir. I'm from Far Off Places, the travel magazine, and my editor said he talked to you about getting an interview and having a look at the fiddle. Since you'in's with the magazine, I ain't even gonna charge you, so long as you make it a good one. I told him I'd try my best, and he disappeared into his little house to get the fiddle in question. The man was on a good piece of land here, a lot of potential out here for growing, and just getting away from people, I supposed. I was a little jealous. I wished I had a place like this to disappear off to sometimes. Maybe, when my writing was done, I'd pick up about 70 acres somewhere and just disappear off into the ether and never have to talk to anybody or write anything weird ever again. Yeah, I thought, and maybe I'd win the lotto and go live on the moon while I was at it. The old guy came back with something wrapped in oilcloth, and when he unbound it, careful as any mother showing off her baby, I found myself gasping like a kid at a freak show. The fiddle was made of this buttery-looking dark wood, the kind of wood that looked like it would drink in the light if you let it. It was beautiful, the strings glistening in the late-day sun, and the frets looked like they might have been made by elves. But it went so far beyond that. The fiddle was somehow alien in its beauty, and I could imagine people believing that it had been crafted by a demon. As I stood there and looked at it, I imagined I could hear it whispering to me, and the things that it said were not altogether pleasant. It invited me to kill the old man and take the fiddle. It invited me to take it from him and play it. It assured me that he would never be able to stop me, and that I would be a much better holder of the fiddle than this fellow was. I very nearly listened to it, but when the old man spoke, it seemed to break some of the illusion, and I looked up as if someone had spoken to me from a deep well. "She's pretty, ain't she?" "She certainly is," I answered lamely. "She talking to you, ain't she?" I didn't intend to, but I found myself nodding and agreeing that yes, she was indeed talking to me. "She tell you to hurt me, didn't she? She tell you to take you and play for real fine?" "Yes," I said, not even having the strength to lie. He laughed, and it sounded like a ghoul laughing from the bottom of a grave. "Heh, I knew he. She talked to everyone like that. You can try, if you won't, but you never do. I had her this long and intend to give her to my son someday. He at college now, music theorem, but he'll come back for the curse one of these days." "Why didn't you?" I asked, and he didn't seem to understand the question. "What?" "Why didn't you take up the curse? If there's no way around it, then how did you manage to avoid it?" I expected him to laugh, to shake his head and call me a fool, but he did neither of those things. Instead, he seemed to contemplate before he finally shrugged. "Never had the knack. I tried once or twice, but I always felt wrong in my hand. Maybe someday, but I expect not. It's safe as not." Even as he said it, I could see his eyes tracking down to it. Clearly there was a desire to play it, to own it, but he pushed it from him and folded it back into the square it came from. I could still hear it, though. Still hear that spidery voice as it spoke to me and asked me to take it up. No wonder he was so sad. If I had to listen to that thing tell me how I could be so much better, I would have damn near killed myself. I tried to give him money, but he shook his head and told me it wasn't necessary. "I think you're the first one to understand what you seen. You seen 'em afore, ain't you? Stuff like that there." I nodded, telling him I had indeed seen a few things like that. He nodded at me soberly, told me to make sure I wrote up a good one when I wrote up the story. I couldn't help but write up anything but a good one. He had shown me something truly amazing, and I wanted to do right by him when the time came. I had intended to come to town, have a look at it, and then be on my way. But something I hadn't anticipated happened. I didn't sleep well that night, despite the jet lag, and I found myself thinking about that fiddle. In my dreams, I saw myself picking it up and running my hand along the strings. I could hear the perfect notes that would play every time I slid the bow across it, and I found my pillow was wet the next morning, or I had cried just thinking about the sounds that it would make. It was weird because I wasn't usually wanting to get emotional like this, but something about the instrument had truly touched me. And in the morning, I found myself heading back up to Slocum's house to see it again. Ernest Slocum did not seem surprised to see me, and he already had the fiddle out and lying across his lap. His hands seemed to shake as he looked down at it, and I realized he was pushing out a well of effort not to pick it up and play it. It must have been driving him insane, and I couldn't imagine what he was going through. "Figured you'd be back," he said, before spitting an impressive hock of chewing tobacco into the yard. "I'd wager you get a lot of return business, don't you?" "Some," he said with relish. Some sees it and gets a fill. Other uns see it and won't another peek. Had you pegged for the lanterns. I was nodding, but I was unable to keep my eyes on the old man. All I could do was look at that fiddle, that magnificent instrument that yearned to be played, and I felt pity for it. It would never be used for its intended purpose, not as long as it stayed here. And there was something sad about that. Even if the instrument had been made by Satan himself, something like this deserved to be played. It deserved to be heard and loved and spoken about for years to come. It deserved to be listened to again and again and never forgotten for as long as anyone lived. How do you do it? How do you own something like that and never play it? He shrugged. Takes some doing. Willpower and suchins. Don't hurt that I seen my daddy driven mad afore it by time. I asked him if he would tell me about it. A story for the article about not just the beauty of the fiddle, but also the danger of it. He nodded and said he would, but he would only tell it once. He said he had never told anybody this story, and he wasn't going to tell it again, no matter how much anybody asked. Seein's better get it right the first time, he said. I told him I would, and he began his story. Keep in mind, as you read this story, I had to translate a lot of it from his backwards English. Probably lost some of it in the translation, but it's as close as I could get. Ernest said that when he was 15 years old, his father had been driven mad by the fiddle. Up until then, his daddy and the fiddle had always had a good relationship. His daddy said he would play the fiddle just enough to get the devil out of it, but not enough for the devil to get into him. Apparently, getting the devil into him was what killed his father, a man whom Ernest had never met. So, his daddy would go out on the road, playing his fiddle and making people happy, and then he would come home and put it down so that it didn't get too cozy, as he put it. Then, about 3 months before he died, his father had done something that he shouldn't have done. My daddy turned hard to the drink, and it make him weak. Ernest was never 100% sure why his father had decided to take up the drink. Ernest thought it might have had something to do with the fiddle, but he couldn't be sure. His father had always enjoyed a drink, but this was different. Ernest said his father seemed to be drinking to forget, though what he was trying to forget, Ernest could never really be sure of. In a way, he thought it had something to do with the fiddle, but his dad would never tell him, and Ernest was afraid to ask. Whatever the case, he would drink to excess, and one night he did something that sealed his fate. Ernest said that he woke up one night, right around his 15th birthday, and heard someone in the living room scuffling about. He had thought it might be a raccoon. They came in sometimes through a hole in the attic, and he had gone down to run it off before it got into the pantry. What he found was his father and the fiddle, both of them sitting in the living room as comfortable as kings. His father was naked, not even the usual undershorts that he would wear to bed, and he was stroking the neck of the fiddle in a way that made Ernest uncomfortable. It was the way some of the boys in his class talked about manipulating themselves in a way that made Ernest feel a little queasy, and he'd asked his father what he was doing. Daddy say, "Go to bed, boy. I'm speaking with the devil." He had gone right on stroking the neck of the fiddle in that way Ernest didn't like. But when he got up and made to head outside, Ernest didn't think he knew his son was still there. He said his daddy's eyes were glassy, and he looked like he was half asleep. It wasn't a way that Ernest was used to having to look at his father, a man who was usually pretty well put together, and he had followed him out into the yard and then into the woods. His father had still been naked, but it didn't really matter this far out into the woods. No one was going to see him any more than they would have seen Ernest, and Ernest had followed him until they came to a spot in the woods that looked burnt and unused. Ernest couldn't have said if it had been burnt by fire or if something bad had simply come up out of the ground here, but whatever it was, his father had stopped there so that the fiddle could do a little more talking. His father had held it up by the neck, close enough to his ear that Ernest thought he might be hearing it say something. And then he began to play. It was the best and worst that Ernest had ever heard his father play. He played like a man possessed, like a man on fire. And as he played, he laughed. He sounded like a dead man in his grave, but all I could do was listen. His father played every song he knew. Then he played a few that Ernest was pretty sure he didn't know. They were not the typical sort of bluegrass arrangements, and most of these were music that he would later think of as classical. Regardless, he played and played, and as the sun came up, he looked to the sky and played something that Ernest would never forget. I can't begin to tell you how he said it. His accent was so thick and broken at this point that I'm surprised I got anything out of it. But from what I gathered, it was something haunting and ethereal, and it sounded to Ernest like blasphemous cathedral music, the kind of thing you'd hear in a church on a night when you weren't supposed to be there. When the sun came up, fully came up, his father stopped playing and fell over dead. The laugh died in him, and he falled over. Ernest went to his father, trying to get him to get up, but it was already too late. The doctor told him his heart had given out, but Ernest was pretty sure that the fiddle had taken his life from him. Ernest had wrapped his hands around the fiddle, more to get it out of the way than anything, and that was when he heard it talk to him for the first time. It promised that it could make him as good a fiddle player as his father had been, and for a moment, the boy had almost believed it. Then, he'd looked at his father, a man who the fiddle had probably made a similar promise to once upon a time, and he'd shaken his head and set it down. He had wrapped it in his father's shirt and never touched it with any intent ever again. It still spoke to him, still begged him to play it, but he knew better than to tempt fate in such a way. He kept it safe, but he never let it goad him into mischief, and he never would. "Put that in your article and see how them like it," Ernest said when he was finished, spitting out more than tobacco juice and wrapping the fiddle in the oilcloth once again. I left money this time, not willing to take no for an answer. I went back to my hotel room, meaning to write the article again, but it was still very hard to start. I just kept thinking about that fiddle, thinking about all the lives it ruined, and wondering if it was something I should tell people about. What if some hapless bystander got a hold of that fiddle, and it did him harm? What if someone came and hurt Ernest and took it from him, and started a whole new lineage of people tied to that fiddle? I had my misgivings, but at the end of the day, I also had bills to pay. The article was going to be one of my best, whether I regretted it or not. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.